Happy holidays. Welcome to the 10, your favorite Big Ten betting show. I'm your host, Greg Waddell, joined by the festive Doug Kezirian this week. We will take you through every single Big Ten bowl game that we can today. We'll give you our overviews and best bets along the way. Do want to say no Troy Macker behind the scenes today. We will miss him. Happy holidays to him and his family as well. But before we get into the show, let's tell you about a weekly promo that we have going on during college football's bowl slate this year. BetRivers customers who place a college football bowl game wager of at least $10 will receive a 50% profit boost for any bowl game. The offer is available once per day of each bowl game. See the app for more details. Doug, let's get right into it today. We start with Northwestern and Central Michigan. This is the GameAbove Sports Bowl. Northwestern favored by 10.5 here. Central Michigan just over 3-1 on the money line. The total is 43.5. Anything catch your eye?
All the size of the point spread did, because you don't see the Purple Cats favored much, let alone double-digit favorites. And that's my apprehension there. Now, this year, Northwestern, a lot more competent offensively than we've seen in years past, or at least recent years. So it's not an automatic fade when you see them laying this much lumber, but it is a concern of mine. Now, that being said, it's the MAC. And I think we're going to get a better idea of the MAC as this bowl season, evolves, and we see teams in sort of bowl games and things like that. The problem is the Central Michigan team just wants to play like kind of a low-scoring game at times, and I just think they can sneak inside the number. It just feels like too many points, and I do worry that the game could get away, become a two-score game, and then the Chippewas are playing catch-up the whole way. And Northwestern's been good; they've been outperforming the market. ATS overall 6-4-2, but 2-2 ATS as a favorite. Now, none of those is big of a number as this, so that's something to keep in mind. Well, they did lay a big number against Louisiana Monroe, so I stand corrected that. But usually it's a short number. I don't know. I just have to lean to the dog here.
Yeah, reminder, this is in Detroit, so it's not far from Chicago, Evanston, but it is technically a home environment for Central Michigan. It's going to be a lot easier for their fan base to get to Ford Field for this game. I've attended this bowl game in recent years, and there have been a lot of lopsided results. This is often a MAC opponent against some sort of power conference team, and if it doesn't go one team's direction, sometimes it can get ugly. Now, just because that's happened in previous years doesn't necessarily apply to this game. I'm looking at the under at 43.5. To me, both of these teams are decent under teams to take consistently throughout the year. Northwestern, we know, can play ugly and play through the trenches. Central Michigan, I've enjoyed watching them this year. They've got the coach that kind of runs the armed forces style football, multi-quarterback system, keep it on the ground. I think this goes one of two ways. Either Central Michigan can kind of muck it up and keep things close, or they don't score at all against Northwestern, and Northwestern probably keeps them under this number regardless. I think I'm adding under 43.5 on my card here for the GameAbove Sports Bowl. Let's go next to the Rate Bowl, where we have PJ Fleck's Minnesota Golden Gophers favored by 2.5 against New Mexico. Total here is 43.5. May I interest you in PJ Fleck in a bowl game, Doug?
Yeah, I feel like they will certainly be prepared here. And the talent gap of the top players of the Gophers, their skill position players, quarterback, everything is pretty strong. But I just feel New Mexico is pretty solid here. We talk about, or at least the general consensus is you don't want to tease bowl games. But I feel like this is a good one to consider, because you can take New Mexico up to 8.5, right? And college juice for teasers, definitely much more digestible. And with the low total in this game, actually the value of a teaser is fairly pronounced. So what it becomes is alt line parlay as well is something you can do on the BetRivers app. So these are all sort of things that I'm looking at, because I think this game's going to come down to the wire. I would have to lean towards Minnesota. They're not great in the favorite role, but I think the talent wins out in their skill positions, I should say. So while I have faded Minnesota a few times this year in the favorite role and certainly in the dog role, I think they, at Iowa's when they got really trounced. I think this is going to stay tight most of the way, and then Minnesota covers the short number.
Under a field goal is interesting. I joked about it when I sort of threw it over to you, but PJ Fleck has a truly phenomenal bowl record. He is undefeated in bowl games as the head coach of Minnesota. He is 7-2 overall in bowl games as a head coach. It's kind of become a running annual trope to just blindly back PJ Fleck. And under a field goal, I think you have to here. Now, obviously, depending on opt-outs, we'll see, but Minnesota is the more talented team. I have a ton of respect for Jason Eck, what he has done with this New Mexico program. You think back to other Big Ten games this year, they beat UCLA outright before the coach firing. They hung with Michigan and made that game closer than other non-power opponents did to the Wolverines this year. I think they're a good team, fun offense. They will certainly show some creativity and take some shots in this game, but until I see PJ Fleck lose on the sidelines at Minnesota, I'll take anything under a field goal against a team that I really don't think has as much talent as the Gophers. Give me Minnesota -2.5. Let's move next to the Pinstripe Bowl. Big brand matchup here. If you would have told us these two teams were meeting in the postseason, we probably would have assumed this would have been in the college football playoff. However, it's Penn State and Clemson in the Pinstripe Bowl. Clemson favored by just over a field goal here. Penn State is +130 on the money line at Bet Rivers. 48.5 is the total. What do you like, Doug?
We've seen a little bit of line movement come down from about 5, and I agree with the steam, and I think the number's still a little too high. Penn State really impressed me down the stretch, and I think the key is going to be the trenches here. I think you're going to run all day on Clemson. So now, look, if Dabo pushes buttons a certain way and rallies this team and improve, that's the other thing is when teams are getting 3 to 5 weeks more of practice, a lot of this comes down to coaching because you have to project how much better a team will be with the right coaching staff and situation in place. Because, especially at the college level, but this goes for all sports, teams are allowed to improve, right? Teams are allowed to improve from week 1 to the end of the season. And then certainly in this month off or whatever you want to call it. So I think the Nittany Lions are the right side here with the 3.5. But, Dabo can certainly coach them up, and this could look like a different Tiger squad. But I've been pretty impressed with the Nittany Lions down the stretch. I will say this, though, with the Big Ten, the middle of the pack left a lot to be desired going in compared to what I thought going into the season. Very top-heavy conference. Obviously, the nation's top 2 teams with Indiana and Ohio State. But that middle of the pack, it was kind of disappointing at times. So I just wonder how good Penn State is. This version of Penn State, obviously, quarterback play is not the same as what it was at the beginning of the season. So cautiously, I'll back the Nittany Lions.
Yeah, I think it's a good number to back the Nittany Lions. It's making me look twice. At first glance, this was a total stay away for me, largely just because I do think Clemson has really played better football down the stretch of the season. They've won 4 straight coming into this game. I don't believe this is the team that started the year 1-3 and kind of got punched in the mouth by Syracuse. That Louisville win ages well to me. They've won, I think, 3 of 4 games by at least 2 touchdowns down the stretch, knowing they kind of needed this furious push to get to a bowl game. Penn State was in a similar spot following the Franklin firing. We saw some really inspired football from these players trying to make a push to a bowl game. It's kind of the weird motivational game of, okay, we got there, and now both sides are going to look up and realize we're in the Pinstripe Bowl, not the college football playoff. Now what? I tend to think it's a good number for Penn State. Plus over a field goal to me, I would take either side in this game, to be honest. This would not have surprised me if it was even closer to I don't know, Clemson -4 up to -5. But to me, it's probably more of a toss-up type game, depending on the quarterback play you get from Penn State. I agree with you. The Nittany Lions should be able to run the ball. Emotionally, the one thing that kind of hangs over this to me is this is Klubnik and his final opportunity with Dabo. They want to go out on a good note. He was emotional at the press conference. So it's enough to just kind of keep me hesitant on the edge. But, closer to kickoff, if it's at 3.5 or even above it, you mentioned it started at 5, I'm going to have a hard time not siding with the Nittany Lions and officializing that play. Next up is a fun one here, the Music City Bowl. A couple of weeks ago, we had Illinois and Tennessee on the basketball court with a Jelly Roll courtside in Nashville. Well, now here you go. Let's run it back with our football programs. Tennessee favored by 2.5 here. Big total at 62. You can get Illinois on the money line at plus 112. Noteworthy here, Luke Altmaier will play in this game. There was a big decision from him with Senior Bowl festivities upcoming as he tries to work his way into the NFL draft, but he wants one more opportunity to suit it up for Brett Bielema with his Illini teammates. What do you like, Doug?
Yeah, I'm on the dog here, I think. Now, this number came down from 4.5. I agree with the line move. Now, keep in mind, Tennessee, you mentioned the total. Tennessee's defense, a little different look. They fired their defensive coordinator. Ohio State DC, Jim Knowles will not be manning the headset in this game. It's going to be their linebackers coach who gets sort of an audition for maybe somewhere else. But anyways, so it's a new DC here. Obviously, the Tennessee defense leaves a lot to be desired. And their offense with the tempo could light it up. And I thought they played pretty well near the end of the season. Really, went to Kentucky, beat them up badly. That was a domination. And then the Florida game, that was so interesting. I think I have to take the over here. I think with both quarterbacks lighting it up, you're going to get Altmaier, you're going to get Aguilar. I think they're going to let it sling it. They're not coming in to play field position and punt game. I think it's a huge number, but I don't see how either defense does much. We came into the season thinking the Illini secondary would be strong, but they've had injuries and it just hasn't been the same. I think the Vols will go up and down the field. They have such athletes at the wideout position, and I just don't see much resistance from either defense, especially with the QBs playing. So I think this number's too low for the total.
I like your angle on the over here. These are two teams that I think really are kind of going to go for broke in this game with both quarterbacks playing. There's not exactly much to worry about on either side at this point. You lose this game, so what? Let's go big. Let's get Altmaier his 400 yards in his final game in uniform here. We know the Tennessee offense is explosive. When they've played defenses that just can't keep up, they've been pretty special this season. I mean, games in the 50s multiple times, in the 40s almost half of their season. To me, this Illinois secondary has been so banged up all season. When they've played good offenses, they've really had no answer other than to try and score with them. Will Altmaier be able to lead this offense to doing that? I don't know. I'm kind of tempted to take the Vols and the over, to be honest, but I think the over is the stronger play, and I feel emboldened by the fact that that's where your heart lies on this game as well, Doug. Let's go next to the Alamo Bowl here. It's the USC Trojans favored by a touchdown against TCU. Total is 55.5 here. What do you make of this one?
I'm on the Trojans, and this number's come up, and understandably, the spread was as low as 3. But I think what started the trend or the trickling of the point spread is when Josh Hoover, the quarterback for the Horned Frogs, announced he was entering the transfer portal. Now, USC will have their quarterback, Jordan Mailata, but the wide receiver U will not be there this year with Mekhi Lemon. Jacoby Lane are going to be out, tight end Lake McCree as well. But I just think the way Lincoln Riley is recruited, and then the receivers are going to be really solid. And again, a few more weeks of practice together, right? Developing that chemistry. So while those stud wideouts are headed to the draft, I think Mailata also wants to prove he can be a really good quarterback without them. I mean, there's something to be said about that because sometimes wide receivers make the QB. And I think they're going to be incentivized. I think last year showed me something with USC and how well they played in the bowl game. And look, Sonny Dykes kind of always has a chip on his shoulder. I can see him rallying the troops, playing the underdog card here. So I'd like to maybe do USC money line, USC and a tease or something like that. I think the Trojans are going to get the win. 7's a big number for a defense that I'm not thrilled about. I just don't know enough about TCU's replacement quarterback. So that's where my apprehension is. But it's USC or pass. I think they can light it up.
Yeah, to me, the handicap for this one simply comes down to one side has their quarterback and one doesn't. This feels like one of the heavier opt-out games of the entire bowl season at this point, and you can't really blame them, right? I mean, especially with those USC receivers, they've got professional futures to take care of. I am probably going to stay away at this number. I just have a weird taste in my mouth staring at a full touchdown with Lincoln Riley without key pieces. I mean, again, it should be Trojans, like maybe call it a lean to USC, just given the fact that TCU will not have their quarterback. But we have seen situations before in bowl season where it can be a coming out party of sorts. And I would even point back to, this is not a bowl game scenario, but a couple years ago when Lincoln Riley had the whole Caleb Williams inserted into the starting lineup. You can never assume that a backup quarterback is just going to be terrible just because he was the backup. So for me, it is a rather large number. We know a huge part of Maeva's success this year has been throwing to Lemon in those wide outs, and I wouldn't be surprised if there are some hiccups along the way here. Honestly, the more we talk through this, I'm kind of looking at that under 55.5. I mean, game with a backup quarterback with really key weapons out for the Trojans. Does that catch your attention at all as we talk through it, Doug?
Not really. Two reasons. USC's defense isn't that good. Now, and it's a Big 12 TCU. Like they get in some track meets, but I do think Maeva and it's Lincoln Riley's offense. Now I know some of the jump balls for Lane and some of those guys, they come down with it. It's in Lemon. It's incredible, but there's also dudes running wide open, and Maeva's going to want to sling it, and I think Riley's going to let him. So I really think USC is going to be able to kind of march up and down the field.
Yeah, USC wants to play games in the 30s at minimum. They don't mind if it's 38, 35. So it's probably the correct approach to shut that down. But I don't know. I'm always looking twice at numbers in the 50s if we have a quarterback that's totally unproven. I will say this: Lincoln Riley won 2 straight bowl games as the USC head man. So he's been surprisingly trustworthy in these types of spots in the past. And I think this number is probably on the dot at USC -7. Those were all the specific games we wanted to discuss today. Before we get to our best bets, Doug, do you have any further college football playoff thoughts since the last time we talked?
Well, the games didn't exactly unfold like I thought they would. And by the way, my sympathy still resonating for anyone who laid the points with Oregon. I feel horrible for that backdoor cover. I do like Texas Tech in that game. I think you don't see coaches come out and proclaim a team as the best in the country. Like we've seen a couple of Tech's opponents do that with BYU. In the most recent in the Big 12 conference title game, Sataki said that in the post game, saying that's the best team in the country. So that kind of caught my attention. And Oregon's defense obviously looked a little leaky because their starters were in against JMU at the end. But obviously the Oregon speed jumps off the page. I feel like the Ohio State line is too high at 9.5. Miami's obviously offense looked inept at times against A&M, but that was, look. The weather with the wind, the kicker missed a few things. There were some things going against them, but I think the Buckeyes will be more ready to play than they were the Big Ten title game, which sounds crazy, but I just don't think they were really up for that game as much as they should have. So that game sticks out to me as the dog in that one. So I like both dogs in those games.
Yeah, you nailed the Ohio State mentality coming into that Big Ten championship game a couple weeks back. We will do full previews of Indiana and Ohio State and Oregon's games in the college football playoff quarterfinals on next week's edition of this show. Before we do wrap, just in a very broad sense, I'm staring at that Alabama-Indiana matchup. This will be a fun one for football fans everywhere. We've got it at Indiana -7, a full touchdown right now. Kalen DeBoer obviously flirting with that Michigan job publicly. Sounds like it's going to go in another direction. Isn't it crazy, just thinking back even a year ago, to be told that Indiana football is a touchdown favorite in a postseason game against the Alabama Crimson Tide? But how do you feel about that number, Doug?
Feels high. And I was really impressed with how Bama responded. Obviously, the pick six was a huge component, but this Oklahoma offense was just so inept at times. I'm not in love with Indiana. I think from the dudes stat, I think they can hang with the dudes of Bama because I think they've built that defense. I was pretty I think 7's a little too high. I think Bama can the problem is Bama's just not that dominant. And they were able to hang on in the second half. It's just that game was such a different script than we usually see from this DeBoer squad. I mean, usually he jumps out first quarter with a lead and then protects it and wins by 3 or something like that. So this was very unusual. The Hoosiers, look, that Iowa game went a certain way. The Oregon game went a certain way. I'd be careful laying that much lumber with the Hoosiers.
Yeah, I'm looking at it further. I mean, feels like almost a third of the Hoosiers season has been under a touchdown. And look, Alabama's not world beaters, but the Big Ten championship game was obviously a dogfight. Penn State came down to the final second, if not for a kind of crazy sequence late. I think Oregon was a one-possession game. And, man, I know Indiana's the best team in the country. I strongly believe that, but it's a huge number. It's a lot of confidence in the Hoosiers. So I'm going to have to keep letting this one marinate. I'm surprised. I believe it opened at 6.5 and got up to 7. I'm surprised it's moving that way, if anything. But as I said, we will have further detailed thoughts in our full previews and best bets for the college football playoff on next week's edition of the 10. On that note, we normally do 2 episodes of this show each week, only 1 this week as we take a break for the holidays. So we will be back next week on Tuesday. Reminder, this show is part of the Bet River Sports Network on College Sports Rush, where you can also get Sports Bettor's Paradise with Jimmy Ott every single week. We thank you for watching this show. As always, happy holidays to you and your family. For Doug, for Troy, for our entire team behind the scenes, cheers, and we'll see you next week.